So Greg Kidd, for those who don't know him, he's a serial entrepreneur. He launched numerous ventures, and he's he's an investor, and he's an early investor in Twitter, who probably everyone knows what it is, and also Square. So Greg is going to be sharing his ideas about open web, and Greg, the floor is yours. I think the mic is not working, Greg.
Is this working? All right. So can I just ask how many lawyers we have in the audience? Not so many lawyers. How about regulators? All right. I'm not sure I'm at the right conference. So the problem I want to talk about today is, let's talk about two companies, Apple and Google. This year, the spending by Apple and Google on research and development, and these are two of the most R&D intensive companies in the Silicon Valley, was surpassed by the amount of money spent on lawyers and on litigating, both on patents and copyright. And the concern here is that the open web that led to the internet that we have today, that was so open 10 or 15 years ago, isn't so open. And I want to talk about what that feels like and why that might be as big a challenge as any of the other things you heard about today regarding startups. So let me first talk about a definition of what the open web is. And this is from a group of journalists that put this together, and it's just a definition. The open web is an interoperable, ubiquitous, searchable network that everyone can use, share information, integrate, and innovate without having to ask permission. And that's the key concept I'm going to come back to, is do you need permission? And it's usable through powerful and universal clients. Okay? Nothing controversial or radical about that definition. And this was the world I thought I grew up in. So let's talk about then. Then includes a period of time when two Silicon Valley-based lads created a blue box. Do people here know what the blue box is? Few people knew what the blue box is. Blue Box let you make phone calls for free, and that was built in 1972. There was another chap from Seattle that he purchased a knockoff version of CP/M operating system, and in 6 weeks he had it rewritten and relicensed it to IBM. There was a young college student that hacked into my company to get in contact with me because he was interested in the bike messenger business that I built back in the 90s, the software for which we built into a company we took public on the NASDAQ. And he hacked into my company just because he wanted to talk to me. And there were two Stanford grad students back in the 90s that began indexing publicly viewable web pages. They didn't ask any permission for the access to those websites. And finally, there was a Harvard sophomore that hacked into the campus profiles and built a mashup student so they could compare and rate the attractiveness of their peers. Now, does everybody know who these people are? Okay. And you know what you would happen to you if you did these things today? You would be in jail. For each of these activities, you would be in jail, and you'd be in jail for a long time. So let's make sure we know who these people were, because these people would all be criminals today under the laws of the land in the US today. So those two Silicon Valley-based lads, that was a couple of Steves. I think one of them is speaking here tomorrow. And they built this blue box. Steve Wozniak built it for $40, and he sold it to college students for $150. That's where they made their first $6,000 or $7,000 to start that company that became Apple Computer. And this was Steve Jobs talking about that experience. He was fascinated by them, yada, yada, yada. But the last statement here is really instructive. He says, if we wouldn't have made the blue boxes, there would have been no Apple, right? So they were not punished for doing this back when they did that. This other chap, the Seattle chap, Bill Gates didn't write DOS. He bought this copy, well, actually bought a manual and had somebody rewrite a version of it, and that's what they licensed to IBM, and that's the MS-DOS that became the foundation for Microsoft today. Can you imagine doing that today, taking somebody else's code in 6 weeks, just reprocessing it based off the manual and then licensing that as your own? This Midwestern undergrad, he had quite a bad hairdo that hacked into my company. Well, I didn't call the police. I hired him because he seemed pretty clever and on the ball. And when I left my company, 6,500 people, I took 2 people with him, and I took this guy. This guy, I never knew quite what he was saying, but that's Jack Dorsey. And what he went on to create, and that's how I got to be in on the ground floor of Twitter and Square, was those 2 companies. Because when he hacked in, I thought it was an impressive thing, not a criminal thing. Those 2 Stanford grads that didn't ask permission, that was Larry and Sergey. That's the foundation of Google. They came up with a PageRank algorithm, but to make that work, they just went to all the different websites, crawled all that data, indexed it, and created the foundation for search that we know today. They did not ask for permission to access those websites. And finally, this guy, before Facebook, what did he do? He hacked in, got all the profiles of his peers, and built that FaceMash site that came before Facebook. He almost got thrown out, but they looked at it as a minor indiscretion and forgave him. So every single one of the founders of all these companies all started out to some degree or another as hackers. And the country that I came from, we tolerated that at one time. So there's one common thing amongst all these folks. Now, I was here a year ago and gave a presentation, and the common thing amongst many of the startup folks was that they actually dropped out of school, right? But there's something else that's common about them. It's that they didn't ask for permission to do what they did. They just did it. And that led to big innovations, not little innovations, but big innovations. But increasingly today, with terms of use and the laws of the land, you need to get permission to do all sorts of things. You need to get permission to copy. You need to get permission to index, to search, to interoperate, to send and receive money. You even need permission to go to the bathroom. It feels like a nanny culture or society. And you guys are sort of familiar with this. I think there was a time ago that if you were a good basketball player from Lithuania, you needed to get permission to be allowed to go and play where you wanted to play. And people sometimes get used to the concept that you need permission to have your own company, all right? Have your own country, all right? So people always talk about America and the myth that it's the web, it's the land of the free, it's the open web, right? Well, I'm here to sort of tell you and warn you in a place where I'm now spending more money, more of my dollars on lawyers than I am on R&D, that dream is changing unless we take hold of it and make sure that the web stays open. So more recently, if you look for sort of stories that are in the press, you hear things like LimeWire, the file sharing network. It didn't just get sued, it got sued for $75 trillion. Okay, that's more money than there is in the whole world, okay? Because there were infringing uses on its network. Okay? A company called Righthaven. Righthaven sets up a site where it takes copyrighted photos and puts them out there in a way that makes it look like it's okay to use those photos and include them in your website. But it's not okay. They just set it up to look like that. And then they proceed to file frivolous lawsuits. This is the first 7. They filed 250 different lawsuits. That's the only business they have, is suing people for copyright violations. And this guy's Aaron Swartz. I'm sure some of you know of him. Okay? He's the guy that wrote this Guerrilla Manifesto. And in the Guerrilla Manifesto, he wrote that information is power. But like all power, there are those who want to keep it for themselves. Sharing isn't immoral. In fact, he thought it was a moral imperative. He said there's no justice in following unjust laws. It's time to come into the light in the grand tradition of civil disobedience, declare our opposition to this private theft. And finally, with enough of us around the world, we'll not just send a strong message opposing the privatization of knowledge, we'll make it a thing of the past. Will you join me? This is the chap that at 14 years old, he worked with Larry Lessig and a group of others to create RSS, the first foundation for streaming data, RSS, the syndication platform.
Swartz dedicated his life to sharing data and information online, developing and popularizing standards for the free and open sharing of information. His resume included co-authoring RSS 1.0 at the age of 14, co-founding Creative Commons, co-founding Demand Progress, which launched the primary campaign against internet censorship bills like SOPA and PIPA, and being a member of the Harvard University Ethics Center.
JSTOR is a company that provides digitized copies of academic journals, and they've already come out saying that they did not refer this case to the feds. David Segalin, the executive director of Demand Progress, said it's like trying to put someone in jail for allegedly checking too many books out of the library.
Okay, so Jason did break a rule. He, on the MIT Library Network, he downloaded way too many articles. Now, take what he did and look at those other examples of those other characters that I gave you and put it in perspective. Okay? Now, none of those other folks really suffered any consequences for their actions. But here, because he wrote that manifesto, those ideas that were so upsetting to some people, the penalty Aaron was facing was the same as this person. This person here, David Headley, is the mastermind behind the Mumbai terrorist attacks that killed 160 people. He received a 35-year prison sentence. Aaron Swartz, for doing those downloads, was also up against a federal rap of 35 years in prison. He had other personal issues, whatnot, but he did not want to deplete all of his family's resources and his friends' resources fighting this. So I think some of you know that in January of this year, he took his own life. He killed himself. Now, this is a guy that made huge contributions to the internet and was a leading figure in stopping the censorship motions that were moving forward in the United States. And he is no longer with us. Now, confession to make. Since last year when I came and talked, I've made a lot more investments in companies. Now, those companies are also getting litigated against. I'm actually now, through those investments, I'm up against the same charges that Aaron Swartz is. That includes copyright, exceeding authorized access, and because I'm doing it now with multiple companies, it turns into criminal conspiracy in the United States. They're all pretty heavy charges. It's not just fun and games of great technology and putting a good team together. I'm now spending as much time and money and effort on litigation and regulation. So, is this just a question of a few bad apples? Is Aaron just a bad actor? Am I a bad actor? Or something fundamentally changed from 10, 15 years ago when we had those other examples that we showed? Are we looking at a closed web in which we are all guilty by design? Now, let me talk to you what I mean by guilty by design. Now, we live in a world of lofty constitutions. You know, the US has the world's oldest constitution. You probably have one of the newest. From that constitution, we have some vague and ambiguous laws. But what we really have, and what this industry is living under, is punishing terms of use. Now what do I mean by that? Terms of use, this small print that most people don't even bother to read. They're called click-wrapped because you don't even sit down and, negotiate them or ink them with a pen. You just click through. And they're often very lengthy and full of legalese. They're rarely read. It's a take it or leave it deal. You have no ability to negotiate. It forbids class action. That means it forbids people collectively getting together and saying, hey, we don't want this. Anybody who wants to sue or complain has to do so as an individual. There's liquidated damages. Now, what's liquidated damages? It simply is the contract saying if you do this, for instance, if you copy this piece of information without my permission, you owe me X dollars. So for me last year, I ran up just under $13 trillion of liquidated damages for the actions of the websites and companies that I'm backing. Furthermore, this isn't just civil. It's not just about money. The way the law works is it actually criminalizes this behavior. So a private actor writing a terms of use can create a situation in which anybody violating that terms of use has actually caused a criminal violation. And so these contracts become a law unto themselves. So let's consider the following example. Really simple terms of use. So this may seem crazy to you. Clicking this button exceeds authorized access. Now those three words, exceeds authorized access, are the key to defining criminal activity in the United States. It's an anti-hacking violation. Because of the fear over Chinese hackers or some of the incidents we've heard, the law has been written in a very open, vague, and ambiguous way, and this is what got Aaron Swartz into a situation where he was facing 35 years of prison because he downloaded too many files. He exceeded authorized access. He didn't break in. He didn't get past a paywall or any sort of security measures. He just downloaded too many files. Now maybe that's an unreasonable example, that you think just clicking a button could actually get you into legal trouble. So let's look at a term from a real terms of use. Okay? Just bear with me on this. So this says that if any program, application, or service that provides access to, use of, or operation or interoperation is prohibited, this prohibition applies, but is not limited to, software programs, applications, services for the use of or operation by any computer or any electronic, wireless, or mobile device. Any technology or product that exists now or in the future. So I would ask you, if you came to a site that had this prohibition on it, how would you interact with it? You can't use a browser. You can't use a computer. You're going to violate those clauses, which means you're exceeding authorized access. Everyone is guilty by design because this is a world in which you all start out as guilty. Now, they may not choose to prosecute you, but if you're a competitor or an innovator that isn't somehow interacting with this site because your site touches their data, what they're saying is we can sue you, we can collect damages, and have you imprisoned unless you get our permission. Now, there would be no Google if they really operated under this world, if they went around and asked for permission to do this. Now, does anybody know what site this is from? It's the 6th most popular site in the United States. It's from Craigslist. Okay? It's from Craigslist. So everybody that uses the site starts out exceeding authorized access. It's just up to them to decide who they're going to sue, block, or both. So some of my sites interact with that data, and so they get sued and blocked. Just one example of a permission-based culture that was inconceivable 10 years ago. That's the norm now, increasingly on sites that write punitive terms of use. These cases never get to court because when someone is facing one of these lawsuits and the other side has almost an infinite amount of money, the startups cave. They just go somewhere else. They go somewhere that hasn't been mined yet with a field full of bombs that will blow up your company if you interoperate with their data or their system. And you know, there's a reason why they called it the internet. The internet was all about the interoperation of all these systems. So again, I really want to emphasize what happens when you get to a tipping point where companies as creative as Apple and Google now view investing in litigation as a better, more safe use of their dollars than investing in innovation. That it's better to litigate than to innovate, and that you have to basically worry about asking for permission. The ironic thing is the founders of these great companies all grew up and built their companies in a period of time when they did not ask for permission. So, you know, what does this feel like? And again, I have full disclosure, I am an investor in Twitter. Even Twitter's doing some of these things now. But it's not just litigation, it's also squabbling with the government. Here's the government basically always trying to get Twitter to give it the goods on who said what when. Here's Craigslist again. Basically caring more about its position in the market than its users. Even Square. Square, we're not getting litigated against so much, but to do money transfers in the United States, they've set it up so that we need 50 different licenses, one for each state. Now, it's okay, Square, we've raised over $300 million, but like one of the startups here that I'm advising on, TransferGo, they just found that just to get a license in one state, California, the state's asking them to put up a $1 million bond before they'll even consider giving them permission. So once again, they're not looking at how good your product is, or they're just saying, hey, you got to pay to play. Permission-based society. You know, PayPal have ever gotten off the ground is when it was starting, it had to pay those licensing fees in every state that it operated? Absolutely not. And finally, another one, PadMapper. PadMapper is the most popular way to find an apartment in the United States. It lets you look at one site and get the apartments listed on many different sites, just like Google, but in a vertical, right? And so some of that data comes from Craigslist. That data provisioning is supported by one of the companies that I support. So that means, once again, PadMapper gets sued, I get sued. And Facebook, is another company that I'm involved with, MessageMe, is busy closing off its social graph to companies that it's happy to have them connect with. But as soon as those companies start getting traction, out goes the rug. Just like the same battle between Twitter and Facebook over Instagram. Who's the loser in this? The loser are the users who lose these features. And really, you may not know it yet, but the loser is startups, because you've got that thing when you're so small and they don't really notice you, you're not going to get blocked. When you get a little bit of traction, the hammer's going to fall. You're going to get that letter in the mail and it's going to say cease and desist. And all of a sudden you're going to start looking at how much you're spending on R&D and how much you're spending on lawyers, and that balance may start to tip. And the last, you know, even though I'm in Twitter, Twitter's even blocking, you know, one of my own companies that has come up with a way to like let you embed payments within Twitter. So all of this is a lot different than it was like 10 or 15 years ago, where people simply didn't ask permission. And so you're here in Lithuania. I encourage you not to follow this example in the US, where we're going down a route where everybody's scared. Everybody's on the defensive. Everybody's trying to find smaller and smaller little niches away from doing something big and bold because they're afraid they're going to be blocked and they're going to be sued. Now, I'm fortunate. I had some good early hits and plays from those early days, and I'm going to burn a little bit of money and I'm going to take some risks. So I'm a little bit more willing to get sued than you are, but it's still pretty lonely out there. So, whereas last year I came and I gave sort of a funny thing about how lucky I was and how all these insights and all these things just seem to happen kind of like in a Forrest Gump world where the opportunities fall out of the sky. This year feels a little different because I'm getting sued so many times. I mean, in a way it's kind of nice. It means like you're getting attention and you've gotten to the point where you're like worth suing, but it's just not as exciting as being in the world of creating things out of nothing. So I don't want you to despair. I want you to like think about it and not just believe that the web is open or that it just stays open without each of us individually and collectively doing something about it. And so the underlying point I want to make is, do we really want to live in a society where you need permission to innovate, where your biggest question about whether your business or your idea or your insight is going to succeed is dependent on somebody else giving you permission to do what it is you want to do? So what do we do about this? Well, the first thing is, I appreciate you just coming because it's just part of getting informed. Like Aaron Schwartz taught me a lot. Young guy, I wish I'd known him personally, but in his passing, I've read a lot more of his work, and the guy really had something to say. If you get a chance and you haven't heard him, I encourage you to read more and understand where he was coming from. You need to find winnable battles. Okay? And that means breaking it down to something that you can take on. Like, not everybody can take on these lawsuits. So I'm not asking you to go out and be like a martyr and get yourself wiped out. Band together. Oftentimes, if you're running into regulatory resistance or litigation, there's probably other people getting beaten up on the same topic. When you're all small startups, don't be competing with each other to death in a market where your biggest challenge may not be each other. It may be figuring out how to overturn the existing order that doesn't want to give you permission to do or try what you want to try. Remember the users. Right? That's what this is all about. Right? Some of these other sites, they've gotten to the point where the user is second. They basically demote the user experience because now it's time to monetize, etc. And the user's getting pushed down the stack. That's actually an opportunity for you guys and gals, is if you stay really focused on the user and get that message out, there is a chance that those behemoths, or whoever has the power that doesn't want to give up the power, will shoot themselves in their foot if you keep focusing on the user. That's what PadMapper did. It's a one-man show, built the company. It's the best search site for apartments in the United States. All he does is focus on the users. Avoid political labels. These issues that I'm talking about are not a left-wing issue or a right-wing issue. There are problems from both the Democrats and the Republicans, the liberals and the conservatives, you know, the radicals and the reactionaries. They all come out in different places, and you can't predict by somebody's political colors where they're going to stand on the open web. Keep innovating. Through code, you can find creative solutions. It's not going to make all the political and legal and regulatory problems go away, but code is magic. It made Twitter. It made Square. We simply innovated and put something there that didn't exist before, and we were ahead of the laws and the regulations. You know, at Twitter, we broke almost every rule that the telecoms had about throttling their networks. But you know, they'd never dealt with Twitter before. By the time they finally got around to wanting to put the throttle on us, it was just too far along. And with Square, you know, Square operates in the world of credit cards. Credit card companies do not let you aggregate transactions. That means you're not supposed to be one merchant that does processing on behalf of 3 million other merchants. But once again, when we put that little dongle out there, it was just kind of too alluring, and we got a little bit of critical mass before they really knew what was going on, and there was just too much publicity for them to put the kibosh down, and Square got out of the gates, even though technically it was breaking the rules. And finally, there's a group of us getting together called the Open Access Coalition, so that we can advocate and educate about these issues. You can have a look at that. And that's really my message for today. And I'd like to take any questions if there are some from the audience.
Thanks a lot, Greg, for the presentation, and give a round of applause to him.